The Man Whore Podcast is sponsored by the Pure Hookup app. Pure Hookup lets awesome people have casual sex tonight. Download the Pure Hookup app on Google Play or the App Store. Pure, the hookup app that says it's a hookup app. Today's show is sponsored by Talkspace, the online therapy company that believes therapy should be affordable, confidential, and convenient. A Talkspace therapist can help put you on the path to a happier life. For a special offer for my listeners, visit Talkspace.com/manwhore. Now let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Man Whore Podcast.
Shout out to all those problematic people just trying to do the right thing. Hey, I'm right there with you. This is Billy Procida, and you are listening to the Man Whore Podcast. Oh, hello everyone. How you doing? Welcome to the show. If you're new, welcome back. If you're not, this is a podcast where I typically talk to women I've hooked up with about sex, dating, and why we didn't work out. However, this week's special guest is not one of my former flames. Before we get to my conversation about porn, masturbation, and shame with Dr. David Lay, I want to talk about a different kind of shame, more of like a public shaming that's been going on online. YouTube sensation Laci Green is currently under attack by some feminist scholars and sex-positive internet peoples and the SJW Nation, of which she is proudly a part. If you don't know who Laci Green is, she is a fantastical YouTuber who has been making sex ed videos for about a decade. She's great. She's filling in a ginormous gap left open by our country's embarrassing lack of comprehensive sex education. She covers, STDs, sexual orientations, genders, consent, masturbation, harassment, and all those awesome, lovely things. What I'm trying to say is, she does the work. She's not some social justice warrior shouting to nobody on Twitter. She has amassed a following of over 1.5 million YouTube subscribers, and she makes a living doing sex ed talks around the country. She's not someone who puts sex educator in their bio, but then sells insurance Monday through Friday. She's an actual force. Okay, cool. In the last month or two, Laci did this outlandish thing where she reached out to anti-feminist YouTubers to gasp, discuss their positions, and hear the logic behind their arguments. And it wasn't just a ploy to get hits, but she was having also private discussions to satisfy her own curiosity. She was open-minded. But fuck her, right? How dare she? Turns out the far left is just as closed-minded as the far right. Now, I'm not on YouTube much at all, unless I'm watching hours of a cappella music videos, don't judge me, but apparently the internet went and lost its damn mind. People started accusing her of being red-pilled, that she'd been converted away from feminism, that she's dating a white supremacist, all sorts of absurd accusations. And all of this just for picking the brains of people she disagrees with. And I don't know, that arguably makes her a more informed and better social justice warrior, wouldn't you think? Do you know who some of the best police detectives are? The ones who are friends with a lot of criminals. I mean, at least that's what I learned from watching The Wire. Now, what does this have to do with my guest this week? Laci Green did a YouTube discussion with Dr. David Lay about the faux controversy surrounding her. I say faux controversy because if you look it up, not one mainstream publication is really going after it. It's just a lot of angry bloggers with day jobs. And she said that one of the reasons she ventured out to explore anti-feminist theory in the first place was she got bored of the usual sex-positive feminist circle jerks where it's just talking to people we like about topics we already agree on. And I'm getting tired of this too. I mean, y'all remember, you might remember, I did that episode with Bauer a couple years ago. Bauer, she runs an asexual meetup group here in NYC, in New York City. It's called Aces NYC. I think it's like episode 80 something. And when she found out that I don't think demisexual is a real orientation, she almost canceled the day before our recording. I told her, what? Are you only going to do media appearances with people you 100% agree with? Then how the fuck do you think Ann Coulter ends up on The Daily Show? You know, I mean, what good does preaching to the choir really do? Oh, and this week's guest also lambasted simply for supporting Laci against online bullying. Online bullying from feminists, from our own team. And that's when the shit hit the fan for me. When I started seeing various Facebook friends from my slutty sphere talking about how they're disappointed in David for talking to her. Talking. Having a dialogue. Sounds a lot like word crimes to me. When I saw that people were mad at Laci fucking Green, I think, you're shitting me. You gotta be shitting me. I mean, don't we have better things to do? Aren't there bigger fish to fry? It's Laci Green, who's helped like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of young adults learn about sex and their bodies. This bewilderment is like the same I feel when people write about how much of a problem Dan Savage is, or on a much smaller scale, how much of a problem I am. I just keep going, aren't there bigger problems to deal with right now? Like, look, if you're in a cave and you have a stubbed toe, a 3rd-degree burn, and someone's about to cut your head off, which problem do you address first? Because right now there seems to be a faction of feminism dealing with a stubbed toe when we've got a government trying to cut our heads off while we try to escape a cave of despair. And by me, I of course mean women, minorities, trans people, and such, because, hey, I'm going to be just fine however this whole thing shakes out. But me, David Lay, Laci Green, we all have experienced this problem where if you don't toe the party line on 100% of the issues, to quote David, off with their head, right? Laci has experienced a profound amount of bullying from a group of people who talk nonstop about internet harassment. So it's starting to become obvious what their message is. Do not harass women on the internet unless they disagree with you and you are us. It's gross. They employ similar bullying and name-calling like any other ideological group. Are you a social justice warrior who deviates on one specific issue? You're problematic. A men's rights activist who thinks women should get paid the same as men? You're a cuck. A stormtrooper who believes in the empire but also thinks humanity shouldn't be killed indiscriminately? You're a traitor. A lot of this extremist thought came to a head in the last election, where you wouldn't even talk to a Trump supporter, right? Or a Republican. Both sides were unfriending each other in record-setting droves, only making room for bot accounts wearing sexy bikinis to befriend us. And I understand the emotion. The Republicans as a party were and still are against some deeply personal issues like a woman's right to her body, or a transgender person going to the bathroom / existing, or a black person not getting murdered on camera by police officers. But one of my favorite parts of doing a comedy show in buttfuck Indiana was talking to some guys after the show. I was talking to these dudes in their late 20s, early 30s, and I talked to them about the issues that were important to them, that made them vote whichever way they did, and about the concerns liberals have about civil rights. And we talked. We didn't shout. And it doesn't mean I endorsed our president at the end of it, right? And it doesn't mean I agreed with them. It doesn't mean they agreed with me. But we listened to each other. And that will assist me in trying to convert them in the future. What I love about people like Laci Green, and soon you'll see also David Lay, is that they are accessible to the masses. Meanwhile, the people mad at them are these feminists who, as Laci put it, are cannibalizing themselves. And they're cannibalizing themselves in their own language. getting caught up in theory and language. Your average person does not understand what was so terrible about what Laci did. And I like to think a lot of my listeners are similarly reasonable people. I like to think that there's some of you listening right now like, Billy, what the fuck? Who cares? Exactly. It's just, and even if you don't agree with her, you don't disregard her part in the SJW movement. You know, I have a valid question to these critics or anyone with a strict ideology. And yes, I've said ideology 2 different ways because, hey, I'm not sure. My question is, does one deviation from party rhetoric make you not part of the group anymore? Are people allowed to even make a mistake? I mean, does one alternate thought about gender make you transphobic despite all the pro-trans rights works you might have done in the past? And alternatively, if Ann Coulter uses the right pronoun for Caitlyn Jenner once, does that no longer make her a tranny-hating dumpster fire? Because it's starting to seem like the sex pos world is willing to overlook years, a decade of important social justice work because of someone seeking out more information. Skepticism is no longer allowed. And if you question us, off with their heads, like a genderqueer Henry VIII. There are those who are treating sex positivity like it's a club, like they get to decide who is sex positive and who is a feminist. Same with other ideologies, or I don't know how to say it. I have this buddy in comedy, he's a comedian. He's conservative on a lot of non-social issues. And he's arguably a little too much of a skeptic. But he gets looked at by the right as not conservative enough because he's pro-choice and doesn't think gays go to hell. Now, that doesn't make him not a conservative just because he doesn't agree on those issues. But no, because he thinks women are people, he's a cuck, and they act like they don't want them. Some say I'm not sex positive, which is retarded. Some say I'm not sex positive because I don't fully prescribe to trigger warnings, right? That doesn't mean I'm not sex positive. It's not a fucking club. And I've had my own problems with members of the sex pos and feminist worlds, which we don't need to get into once again. And that was a situation, by the way, where I fucked up and I had to apologize. But this stuff with Laci and David, this is fucking ridiculous. It's Laci fucking Green. It's an adorable half Iranian girl who escaped the Mormon church to teach the world about sex. Are you kidding me? It goes to show you truly can't win. You're not going to please everybody. And the loudest dissenters will always be concerned with the "which side are you on" rhetoric. I learned at a young age that teams are dangerous. Chris Rock, in his Bigger and Blacker album, he talks about political parties and how they're stupid. He goes, look, there's some things I'm conservative about, and there's some things I'm liberal about. Crime, I'm conservative. Prostitution, I'm liberal. It's one of my favorite quotes of his. I've been learning over the last few years with this podcast and on Twitter that I will not please everybody. I'm too problematic for some of the sex pos people. And then, to some of the comedians who I correct about gender pronouns, I'm an annoying faggot. I can't win. So I might as well not worry about it. And Laci says as much in one of the videos, this video series she put out that caused such an outrage. She's like, I know what I stand for, so I got to do me. And I was just like, yes, I mean, that idea really touched me. Because every time someone says I'm a quote, proven misogynist or transphobic or whatever, I mean, that shit hurts. Because it couldn't be further from the truth. My opinions are out there and they're of public record. And more importantly, I know what I stand for. And the way I show it will never please everyone. So I gotta do me. And so does Laci. And so does this week's guest, Dr. David Lay. And I'll have a link in the show notes of the Laci Green videos and the Laci/David video. All that in the show notes. You can check them out. I do encourage you to watch them. They say some interesting things about the movements and movements in general. But let's get on to some happier things, right? Okay, we've got a show this week. But first, before we get to the show, I got some show dates. Yes, show dates. Okay, this Sunday, July 9th, I'm going to be at Lucky Jack's down on the Lower East Side for Comedy Fight Club. I'll be doing a roast battle. Then July 17th, I am at Stand Up New York for the Great Love Debate. Then Connecticut, yo, what's up, CT? I'm coming up there on July 30th. I'll be at the Comics Comedy Club inside of Mohegan Sun. For more information on those show dates and more, head on over to manwhorepod.com/comedy. And while you're over at manwhorepod.com, be sure to sign up for the mailing list. Tomorrow I'm going to put out my monthly newsletter, so you can sign up just in time. It is July. It means we are soon approaching August, which means we're soon approaching football season. This is not an ad read. You don't have to skip ahead. I'll keep it kind of brief. Look, right now you're listening to the reigning Fan Whore Fantasy Football League champion. All right, last year I won the Man Whore Podcast Fan Fantasy Football League with the help of a young man named Ezekiel Elliott. And we're doing signups again. Okay, so if you would like to be in a fantasy football league with me and your fellow fan whores, shoot me an email at manwhorepod@gmail.com. It's a $30 league. We do it's 12-team half-point PPR. Before we get to this week's guest, Dr. David Lay, I have a nice teaser clip for you from my bonus episode coming out tomorrow with sex hacker Kenneth Play. Kenneth has been on the podcast before, quite some time ago, and we did a really cool bonus ep about adult sex education and accessibility and cost and how to get your girlfriend to have anal sex with you. So I'm going to give you all a little bit of a teaser clip on that one, and then I'll tell you how you can get access to the full thing.
Just say if you always wanted to have anal sex with someone, right? And you never learn how to communicate with a partner in a way that we're willing to try anal sex with you, you're missing out every time you fuck. So I love teaching men how to talk to women about engaging in anal sex. And I always have, one of the questions that I guess asked a lot, how do I get my girlfriend and wife to try anal? And I finally figured I cracked the code and I have the right answer. What do you think
the code?
It is? What do you think it is?
Do you want like my real answer, the funny answer? Because the funny answer is a Porsche.
Both.
A Porsche. Sometimes we'll do it. Well, tell me what you cracked the code. What's the code to getting her to do it? Try anal.
Really good at everything else first. See, for someone to trust you, right? Like you wouldn't give your student chef the best ingredient in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to think of it like this. If you're really good at everything else and pleasuring her, someone is way more likely to trust you with something they don't feel very comfortable at or they don't have much experience of. So if you can pleasure her in every other way and then you propose anal sex.
Well, he's really good at all this stuff. I guess he'll probably be good at that too. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you're really good at playing with someone's G-spot, then they go like, if he's really good at that, maybe he would know something about that too. So I think being educated and also willing to offer your own butt is a huge thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's because you would know the feeling of like, oh shit, now someone's going to pay with my butt. So if for guys who want to have more anal sex with women, if you never receive, you wouldn't have that relationship. And it's really important for you to have that relationship when you want to give it because you would approach it completely differently.
Right.
However you want your ass to be approached is probably how your partner wants it. So,
are you enticed? Are you intrigued? Would you like to hear more? You can get access to the entire bonus episode with Kenneth Play, as well as dozens and dozens of bonus episodes of the Man Whore Podcast on Patreon. You can get access to the Kenneth Play episode at the $5 and up level, but you can get bonus episodes for as little as $1 per month. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. And if you would just like to learn more about Kenneth Play and the sex workshops that he does, you can check him out at kennethplay.com. You can also find him on Instagram. He's often very shirtless. And now for this week's guest. Now, Dr. David Lay, I forget how I became aware of him, if it was Somebody bought me his book. I think I had it on my Amazon wish list. It's called Ethical Porn for Dicks, A Man's Guide to Responsible Viewing Pleasure. And it's by this guy, Dr. David Ley. And I looked into it. I started following him on Twitter. I was like, this cool guy. And he happened to be visiting New York. I thought, perfect. Let's have a chit chat. He is, of course, an internationally recognized expert on issues related to sexuality and mental health. He wrote an interesting book about the hot wifing fetish. He's also written about debunking sex addiction. And now he's battling shame surrounding masturbation and porn. I actually listened to this episode when editing it with my intern and, out loud on the speakers. And when it was done, she was like, he was really awesome. Like, I'm going to go follow him on Twitter right now. And I suggest you all go do the same. So now let's go ahead and get to the interview. Perfect. By the way, and I saw them again on your cards. I love I love those those old primal drawings.
Yeah.
Like, where do you find? And if you can get a little closer to your mouth.
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, I found them. Those are all actually from all over the world. That was one of the neat things, is that those drawings are, some of them are thousands of years old. There's not a continent on the planet except for Antarctica that doesn't have pornographic petroglyphs carved somewhere.
And those are how old do those date back?
They range anywhere from 400 and 500 years to 10,000.
10,000 years?
Yeah.
I do a bit about like old porn, how old it is. It was like in ancient Rome, like you had your mural in your house, and if you got bored of your porn, you had to go jerk off at some other guy's place.
Right.
And like some guy's like, Billy, what are you doing here? It's like, you have the Asian mural. I don't know what you want me to do, man.
Well, the nice thing about the petroglyphs is that they, if you jerk off to them with a campfire going, they flicker. It's like stop motion photography. At least that's what I heard.
That's really cool, man. Well, I want to say I'm here right now with Dr. David Ley, author of Ethical Porn for Dicks, amongst other great reads. You've also probably read him in Hustler or Playboy, or maybe you went past the article in Hustler and Playboy on your way to Pictures.
Hey, I was in Time magazine as well. I send them all to my mom. She only reads the articles.
I was like, how do you know I don't jerk off to Time magazine too? Also a therapist, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a clinical psychologist in Albuquerque. I'm also a certified sex therapist, et cetera, et cetera.
Et cetera, et cetera. Well, thanks for coming on the show, man. I finished your book on like Monday or Tuesday and really enjoyed it.
Cool.
It read like kind of like a self-help book almost. I wasn't sure picking it up if it was like an academic heavy book or if it seemed like kind of self-helpy for someone who's like concerned about his porn consumption.
Yeah, my first two books are pretty academic. My first book is called Insatiable Wives, and it's about the cuckold and hot wife lifestyle. And then my second book was The Myth of Sex Addiction, which really kind of took on the whole bullshit school of porn and sex are addictive. This book, I actually wrote it 3 times. My first version was very kind of my typical writing, kind of scholarly. But I said, I want guys to read this book. And first people told me, well, guys don't fucking read. So, it's a losing argument to write a book for guys. But I said, guys are the ones that are getting in trouble for porn. Women, and I keep getting challenged. People are like, well, when are you going to write the book for women? I said, well, when women start fucking losing their jobs or losing their marriages for masturbating. Because right now it's not happening. Girls and women aren't getting in trouble for any of this shit. Guys
They're just getting kicked out of libraries.
Yeah, that's right, for being the performer, which is kind of amusing. But but to write a book for guys, I really did have to look at, trying to make my message accessible. And I thought about, instead of me being a therapist, what would it be like to talk to guys about porn sitting at a bar? So I wrote the book as though I was sitting at a bar with a buddy, drinking beer and talking about their porn. And any issues or concerns that they had. And, some of the book I actually wrote on my fucking phone during boring meetings. I'm an administrator of a large behavioral health agency, so I spend time in meetings with bureaucrats and managed care organizations. And so when I was bored, to keep myself from like flipping out and screaming at people, I would, jump on and I'd write this stuff. And So it forced me to be kind of concise. It forced me to be more colloquial and accessible. And ultimately, what I'm hearing from folks is that they enjoy it. They can engage with it. I've had women, say that they bought it for their husbands because their husbands are dicks and like porn. And then the women are like, well, and then I ended up reading it and I really liked it and I learned something about my husband's sexuality that I didn't know before. That's cool. I like hearing that.
Yeah, it's very colloquial. It's very like talking him off the ledge type of language sometimes. Like, hey man, it's okay.
Yeah,
you're not broken.
Right.
It's fine. There's a very you do you boo boo type of like attitude to it, which I really like. It's like one thing jumped out at me. I've had Dr. Jana Vringalova on, and she had a study a few years ago where it was like, if you think casual sex is fine, when you have casual sex, you'll likely feel fine about it.
Right.
And if you're against casual sex, then when you have casual sex, you'll probably be against it, which is like a no-brainer, right? And you said a similar thing. It's like, hey, if you think porn's cool, when you watch it, you probably won't feel guilty. And if you think porn's evil, well, you'll probably feel evil afterwards. Like,
yeah, exactly. Actually, very well said. And that's a big point that I'm making these days. Jana's research really drives a lot of that. And what we're finding is that it is that moral conflict. And now the challenge right now is that there are all these people, there are all these guys who were, raised in religious communities and, they were taught nothing about sexuality. And then, they get their smartphone and they can all of a sudden access all of this material that they were never taught how to manage. They don't understand their own sexuality. They don't understand their sexual desires. And now they can access this material and it fucking scares the shit out of them. What I like to say, though, is if somebody goes to the beach and they drown in the ocean because they were never taught to swim, we don't blame the ocean. We blame them for not learning to swim and their parents or responsible adults who did not teach them to swim. There are people who are drowning in the internet world of sexuality because we never taught them to swim.
Because we still don't have comprehensive sex ed in schools. I think
that's a big part of it, but it's not just that. It is also the message that sex is scary and that your sexual desires should be shamed and hidden. You shouldn't think about them. You should those sexual desires that are not okay, you should hide from them, as opposed to trying to understand and gain control of them. And I think it's beyond comprehensive sexual education. It's about, the conflict now between these historical sexual values and the modern world. I mean, states keep, these conservative politicians in various states keep identifying pornography as a public health crisis. Well, it's because they are scared of the way the world is changing sexually, and they look at porn as the canary in the coal mine. It kind of is, because people who watch more porn become less religious, have more open, egalitarian values, are less shaming of sexual diversity. Folks who are concerned and want the right kind of sex to be the only kind of sex, they should be scared of porn because porn teaches people that they're wrong.
Yeah, you want to bring me back to Catholicism. Be like, you know what? God changed his mind. He's pro-porn. I'd be like, hey, I'll give him another try. I'd be like, yeah. What made you want to get into porn? What makes a man?
So
what makes
Google,
a man say,
David
I need to
porn.
write a book about porn?
Well, the story goes back a little further. I mean, I was I was clinically depressed back in like 2007 or 8, and I ran into these couples that live the hot wife lifestyle. And I'm a good clinician, good scholar, and I looked and there was nothing written about them. And so I said, well, I've always wanted to write a book, and here is something I can do that doesn't depend on goddamn bureaucrats and managed care organizations and stuff like that. And so I spent a year interviewing people about their hot wife and cuckold lifestyle. And, I post ads on Craigslist and they would send me naked pictures of the wife. And I'd say, wow, it's, that's awesome. She's beautiful. But I really just want to interview you. And at the end of it, I had a book.
Yeah, but would you fuck my wife after the interview, please?
I did not fuck any of the wives. I still have some of the pictures though. And at the end of it, I had a book and it got published because nothing had been written about it. But I wasn't depressed anymore because writing and talking and thinking and exploring issues around, these kind of kinky sorts of sexuality boundaries turns out to really actually be very cognitively and mentally health good for us.
Wait, how did the depression tie into talking to all these couples?
Well, because when we are turned on and when we're sexually excited, we're not depressed.
Okay.
There was this lady, Madame Germaine de Stael. She was a Napoleonic era writer, and she actually wrote to one of her lovers one time that she had to take a new lover because she was so depressed, and she knew that a new lover and sex with a new person was the only thing that counteracted her depression.
That new relationship energy.
Relationship energy.
Yeah, you just feel sexy all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't love you anymore. Just sometimes I need a quick little spark, and then I'll come right back. And
it's those vibes, and and then it's also the antidepressants that are in semen. There's studies from State University of New York that finds that there are abnormally high levels of antidepressant hormones and chemicals in semen.
Listen up, ladies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, at some point the FDA is going to make all guys have a fucking tattoo on their stomach that says points an arrow down. This thing contains psychoactive elements.
I got the cure for depression
That's
in
right,
my dick.
right here in my pants. But
are those studies written by men because they also say cum, it's good for the face, it's good for depression, it can get you a job. I mean, look, there's so many uses for semen.
That's
just
right.
Please blow me, please.
Kinsey said that we'll never actually know the average size of the human penis because it's always half an inch shorter than the penis of the lead researcher. Now, clearly, what that means is all such research must be done by women.
Yeah.
And in fact, in that research, there was a lady that was one of the lead authors. But I think that where we're going is recognizing that it is those conflicts. It is that desire to have a kind of sex that you were taught is not okay, that makes people feel like shit. And where we can help. And the reason I wrote the book, was because I was seeing so many men who were coming in, getting in trouble for looking at porn. One guy was an engineer, and he, like a lot of guys, he didn't have any really good coping skills to manage his emotions or his depression. And most men don't. Most men don't have ways to manage these negative feelings. They lose somebody or they struggle at work or whatever, and they're bored and depressed. And porn and masturbation makes you feel better. And it works really, really well. And so then they find themselves looking at porn or at work just as a way to feel better. So this guy was doing that. But I asked him a question that I ask all these guys, which is, what kind of porn are you watching? And he was watching urophilia porn, water sports porn with urine and stuff like that. And so I asked him, well, he's been married 15 years. Did your wife know that you're into that? He goes, no. I wonder what it'd be like if you told her. So we practiced how he could go home and talk to his wife about this sexual interest that he'd had his entire life, had never shared with her, and was watching porn in secret at work because that was where he could watch it in secret. And he got in trouble for it and was going to lose his job because of it. He came back and he said, dude, she's into it. And it wasn't like it was a big thing for her, but she was willing to make it part of their sex. Quote Dan Savage, she was good, giving, and game. She was willing to incorporate that sexuality into their lives. Now he didn't have to watch it in secret and suffer the consequences of losing work and job because of it. So it was the shame, it was the secrecy that was the problem, not the interest in pee or porn or whatever. Those are the guys I want to help.
Yeah. Okay, well, what was your relationship with porn? Like, what was your upbringing like that? Were you in like a cool, accepting household that let you watch porn, or did they talk to you about sexuality, or was it a type of thing where it was swept under the rug?
Oh, that's a good question. Like a lot of guys, I had older male friends that gave me Playboy. When I ended up with an accidental, subscription to Playboy, my mom was just like, "Yeah, okay, whatever," and then she would throw them away.
Wait, you would subscribe to Playboy?
Yeah.
As a kid, a teenager?
Yeah.
And you didn't change the address? Rookie move.
I wasn't that smart. Yeah, no, but this was back in the olden days. The fucking magazine was delivered by horse and buggy. But I remember the first time I saw a naked picture, and just being so excited at the idea of this person who was confident and aroused enough to share their naked body with other people, and I thought that was really, really powerful. Now, and when I look at porn, I like to look at amateur porn because I like the idea of these being real people, even though I know that actually most professional porn performers are doing it because they really like it, because they're engaged by it and they're excited by it. And most amateur porn is actually not really amateur. It's actually kind of pro-am sort of porn. But that fantasy, that fantasy kind of turns me on and touches me. But as
really, you're touching yourself.
Well,
but.
yeah. 95% of porn use, mostly in men, is accompanied by masturbation, and so that's one of the really important things. Is that whenever we read in Time Magazine or New York Times or some damn legislative stuff where they're attacking porn, what they're actually attacking is masturbation. That they don't want people jerking off because they think that jerking off is unhealthy, that it takes away from marriage or relationship. And it's the same as when Kellogg's Corn Flakes was invented as a way to prevent masturbation. The idea
What?
that in the 1800s, there was an idea that spicy food made people masturbate, that it led to people being too focused on their bodies. And so Kellogg's Corn Flakes and graham crackers were
Where
both
the fuck
invented.
do you get that idea?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
I live in New Mexico.
Wait,
We got
what?
lots of spicy food. People are not masturbating all over the place.
They're just diarrhea, right? Isn't that what spicy food does? It's the opposite of feeling sexy.
Well, however, graham crackers, if you add, marshmallow and chocolate to it and you make it a s'more, it's pretty fucking sexy.
Yeah, see, that's hot.
Like,
the
that's hot.
spiciness.
Smear it all over.
Yeah.
But there was the
We're going to
idea-
make boring food and people's sex lives are going to get boring. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
There was the idea that masturbation takes something away. You're not supposed to masturbate on the day of a sporting event because it makes you less athletic, right?
Right.
And it turns out, of course, no, that's not true. People who masturbate more tend to be healthier, live longer lives, have smaller waistlines, better relationships. What we're finding now, the best research is that, these things don't exist in isolation. That, somebody who feels dissatisfied in their relationship sexually will masturbate more as a sign of discontent. And oftentimes, especially men, they're looking for something in porn that they're not getting in their relationship. So the problem there is not the porn. The problem is, why can't they talk about what they want in their relationship and now try to learn how to negotiate getting that? But again, we live in this culture and in this society where there's this Disney myth that, once you fall in love, that's the right person forever and that's your one. And if you ever want somebody else and there's something wrong with you, wrong with the relationship and wrong with that person. So unfortunately, women are really triggered and challenged by porn because they see their men using porn and feel like it's taking something away from them. That's a conversation that I want to help guys have, to talk with their female partners about, look, I love you and I love your boobs, but sometimes I'm turned on by looking at girls with different kinds of boobs. Or sometimes I'm turned on looking at girls with boobs and a dick, and that's not because I'm secretly gay or bi. It's not because I don't want you, but it's because I want my sexuality to be richer and more varied and more diverse, and can we negotiate that within our lives? Now, it would not be okay today if a guy said to his wife, well, when you masturbate in the bathtub, I only want you thinking about me. And if you think about anybody else, then that's a problem. Nobody would be okay with that.
Yeah.
But we are okay right now with women saying, oh, my husband's watching porn and that's got to stop.
Well, maybe I come from like a more sexually privileged place. So I'm reading the book, and initially I'm thinking like, haven't we kind of moved past it? Like, men watching porn is like evil, and it means he doesn't love his wife. And I think I guess maybe it's because I live here in New York City, like one of the slutty cities you can be in, and I don't encounter that as often. I don't encounter women who think my using porn is weird, but I guess that's still prevalent nationwide or in between the coasts and whatnot.
Yeah, it is. But, even here in New York, you've got, sex addiction therapists who are talking about, internet pornography is the crack cocaine of sex addiction. Well, you're supposed to love sex because if you don't have sex, you're not healthy. And we're going to use sex to sell you shit. But if you like sex too much, then that's a problem.
And it's like how much sex is too much sex.
That's right.
You know?
And now if you have more sex than your therapist, then you're a sex addict.
Okay, so I just need to see slutty therapist. That's that's the solution. There we go.
That absolutely slutty therapist. That's my next website. Slutty therapist. I love it. I know some therapists that would probably pose.
That's fun. That's fun. This is a section that I loved in the book. It was the child porn section. Because it's this whole thing of like, here's the thing about child porn, and there was this great section of what to do if you accidentally and I didn't even think about, because I come from the generation of when I was a teenager, Napster and like LimeWire were big, right? So when I'm 15, my porn usage isn't going to a website or a tube site. I was just going to Napster, typing tits, click, 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 everything. Because a lot of the files wouldn't work. So you just see whatever worked. Mm-hmm. And that was whatever porn I had. And part of me, I don't know if I should be legally saying this on the show. I don't know if I didn't download something with someone underage with that method when I was 15. And you had this whole section of like what to do, and you like call the authorities, and you tell them it's accidental, and you even address the concern of what if they think my accidental is fake accidental. But that's a real concern out there, especially if you're into amateur porn.
Yeah, it is. There are guys now who are registered sex offenders for accidentally downloading child porn. I mean, last year the FBI took over several of the main sites on the dark web that were distributing child porn. And for 6 months, the FBI ran the sites, and they were collecting IP addresses of the people that were downloading it. And it's kind of funny that during that time, some of the users said, "Wow, the site has gotten really better." And so apparently, the FBI IT system is really good at running child porn sites. But there are guys who have downloaded child porn accidentally, unintentionally. I mean, Pee Wee Herman. Remember, Pee Wee Herman is a registered sex offender for having a large collection of erotica that included pictures of children nude from the 1800s.
Yeah, so if he's knocking on your door, it's not just him being egotistical, but like, hey, I'm Pee Wee Herman. I just want you to know I live here now.
Right.
He legally has to do that.
And I went to the FBI and I said, and I was worried the FBI was going to fucking arrest me. They're going to look at my damn Google search. Well, and what happened like 3-4 weeks ago? The Congress voted to sell our search histories. Right? That your search history is no longer private. Anything you have ever searched for, the government and marketers can know. And so a lot of that privacy is sexuality. The internet is a wide, broad place, and people end up with stuff accidentally, and then they flip the fuck out. And a lot of times they're thinking, I just delete it, or, I set my hard drive on fire, hit it with a sledgehammer. But unfortunately, your IP address is on there.
It's forever.
Yeah. And the tube sites, Pornhub and Xhamster and RedTube and all those folks, they don't produce content in most cases. They are just collecting it, and other people are uploading it. So what happens is somebody uploads porn that is illegal or child porn or non-consensual, and when the site finds out that it's illegal, they'll delete it, and they will give the IP addresses of everybody who ever downloaded it to any authority that asks.
And that's why if you pay for your porn, that's why you see that the little legal thing come up before. You're like, hey, where are the tits?
That's
the
right.
stuff you fast forward through. That's like to ensure you that this was made legally and consensually and ethically, or maybe not as ethically, but sometimes. But
hopefully, I mean, there's an attorney in London named Miles Jackman who this is Jackman. There's a joke there. I'm sure I just got that, but he protects guys. He has legally protected the guys that have gotten caught in these cases. And one of the things he told me was that he had a case of a guy who was accused of having child porn, and the porn really did look like it was child, but it turned out it was commercially made, illegal porn where the actress looked young, he was able to track that down and prove that she was of age. But he could only do so because of the legal protections of a legal porn industry. So we need to protect that. We need to protect a legal porn industry and an ethical porn industry to protect ourselves.
And luckily we were able to, we're continuing to protect that. Prop 60 that was like the one lone bright spot after the election was
right.
like, well, Prop 60 was defeated in California, and you guys have heard me talk about that plenty, and you've heard some porn stars talk on that before, but like that was scary. That was kind of, that was fucked.
It was just the first salvo, though. I mean, that was just the first shot of a whole bunch of conservative money shots that are coming.
Ladies, don't spend Saturday night chatting with a dude who doesn't appreciate that you have to be at brunch by 11. People on the Pure Hookup app don't need to chat for 3 weeks before making plans. You've got 1 hour. Take it or leave it, buddy. Download Pure on the App Store or Google Play today and start meeting awesome people tonight. Get your needs met right now so you can go to sleep focusing on what really matters. Prosecco and pancakes. Pure. The hookup app that says it's a hookup app. We all need to take a little bit better care of ourselves. Some self-care, some aftercare. Hey, maybe you're coming down from subspace. Your mental health is important for a full and satisfying love life, and that's why I'm telling you about today's sponsor, Talkspace, the online therapy company. They make it easy to connect with an experienced, licensed therapist handpicked just for you for as little as $32 a week. Jesus, that's a steal. I actually love this idea. You can send your therapist text, audio, and video messages whenever you want, and you can even schedule a live video chat. You really don't have an excuse anymore to not get therapy. To sign up or to learn more, go to Talkspace.com/manwhore or download Talkspace on the App Store or Google Play. And as a special offer for my listeners, you can use coupon code MANWHORE to get $30 off your first month. And you'll be showing support for this podcast. Again, make sure you use the coupon code MANWHORE for $30 off your first month. Talkspace. Therapy for how we live today. Now back to the show.
There are multiple laws now being introduced in multiple states. For instance, in Utah, I was brought out to Utah to talk about porn. And I asked friends, how would I go about getting tar and feathers off just in case? I wanted to be prepared. So as I did my talk, I was completely coated in butter underneath my clothes. Everything ended up okay. I was safe. But
wait. I must have missed something because you were like, I went to Utah and now I'm covered in butter. I'm like, wait,
hey,
what?
This is a fun
Why
story,
are we doing,
man.
Wait, what?
I was worried about getting tarred and feathered.
Literally.
No, not really.
Oh, okay. So
I coat myself in butter just kind of regularly. It's sort of my kink, but that's all good. But they just introduced in Utah a new law that allows anybody in Utah to sue porn manufacturers if a kid ever accidentally sees that porn.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Now that law is probably going to get shut down. A couple of other states have now introduced laws trying to require porn to be restricted on the on every computer unless you pay $20 to the government to have that restriction taken off.
The money should be going to the porn industry.
Right.
They need it more.
But all of these laws are getting introduced by this, hyper-conservative, anti-porn, anti-sex industry. That these folks, it's always really important to ask, well, in your definition, what constitutes porn? And in your definition, what constitutes healthy sexuality? Because when you start asking that, you find out that they believe only heterosexual monogamy, typically for love or conception, is the only kind of sex that is healthy or okay. These folks don't, in the United Kingdom, they put restrictions on access to porn. And then it just so happened that the porn that they were restricting was female-dominant porn, squirting porn.
Face-sitting.
Yeah, face-sitting. They had a face-sitting protest. I loved it.
Yeah.
But what that means is that it's not really porn these people have a problem with. It is you having a kind of sex or sexual interest that they don't like, that they have a problem with. Now, it's fine for them to have that problem. It's not fine for them to use the legal system covertly to enforce their moral agenda. It's the moral agenda I want to talk about, and because then we can help to explore. Because what we find is that whenever some conservative moral politician is going after some kind of sex, that's actually his kink. That's what he's into. So if he's out there going after child porn, he's really watching kiddie porn at home. And that's what we need to talk about, because those guys oftentimes they have the belief that I can't control myself, and the only way I can be safe is to have this material not available in the world. The world must restrict me. I can't manage myself. I feel bad for those guys, but it's not okay for them to put that restriction on everybody else just because they can't manage their sexual desires.
And that makes me think of that documentary Outrage. I don't know if you saw that. It's pre all the states starting to legalize, same-sex marriage, but it's on Netflix still, and it's just about all these like closet case senators and Republicans who were voting against gay rights, and they were the ones getting caught in same-sex scenarios themselves, and all the toe tappers and the governor of Florida and stuff like that. A great documentary. It's actually interesting to watch it now.
Right.
After all this legislation has happened, now after the Supreme Court decision, because I think that documentary is from like 2000, 8 or something. It's interesting to watch in retrospect, but it makes me think of that. It's the same people, it's really all just projection.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's all total projection of their own fears and issues onto other people, which I feel bad for them. And those are the guys, those are the people who are growing up in these families and these communities where they're not taught to understand their sexuality. People in the BDSM community, people in swinging and open relationships, they are better at practicing safe sex, using contraception, and negotiating consent than anybody else. They're actually good at the things that people are saying that those relationships cause bad things of. And
the sex party I'm going to tomorrow, that if you're a newbie, you have to go an hour early to the consent lecture that they give for the newcomers, because a good party, a good scene has a very consent-heavy culture, and it's way more consent-heavy than your average frat party or bar scene in Montana.
Yeah, they have volunteer consent monitors.
I don't know why I just shout out Montana and just put them on blast. That was weird.
Yeah, and maybe Missouri or Louisiana. And there should be volunteer consent monitors at bars and frat parties, and there's not.
There's some great. Have you seen these campaigns? The posters. I think they're in women's bathrooms. Don't ask me. I'm not in women's bathrooms. I just see pictures on Facebook.
Okay, you expose yourself there. Okay.
But these posters where it's like, it says to women, like, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, go to the bartender, ask for this name, and it's like the code word. Like, ask for Amber, and that's the code word for, I'm in an uncomfortable situation, I don't feel safe with this guy, and the bartender will intervene and help you either get separated from that person making you uncomfortable, or help you get into like a cab safely alone. Really great campaign. I'll put a link in the show notes, everybody.
Yeah.
But how'd you skip, hop, jump through life and end up here with this attitude and outlook on sexuality? I don't. Where do you come from? Where'd you grow up?
I was an Army brat. I grew up all over, so we traveled a lot. But the reality is, I grew up in libraries. So I read a lot. I was a sci-fi junkie, and
those are the real kinky people, man. The geeks,
the Renaissance festivals and the sci-fi conventions. Yeah,
everyone's like, I would never fuck those people. Are like, it's okay. Yeah. They're fucking plenty.
Yeah, well, remember Revenge of the Nerds? Yeah, I'm sure you're too young for that movie, but
just a pinch.
Yeah, the nerds are really good at sex because that's all they think about. The jocks are thinking about sports and other shit. I grew up with that, but I actually started in my clinical work. I actually started working with sex offenders and treated sex offense in adolescents and juveniles for a long time. I still do some of that work, but what I found was that clinicians, other therapists were sending me cases that weren't actually offending, but they were just some kind of sexuality that the therapist didn't feel comfortable dealing with, which it turns out is most sexuality, because 90 to 95% of therapists have no training in sexuality. That's one of the deep, dark secrets of therapy, is that most therapists have no training or education about sex.
So why do you have the training and education about sex?
Because I reached out and got it, because I recognized I didn't have any background. Yeah, my last name is Lay, so I was obviously qualified to talk about sex.
You love the double entendres in words.
Oh, totally, yeah. Well, again, I'm a book geek. I love all the puns. But I recognized that we as therapists weren't talking about sex, and so now actually one of the things I do is I travel the world providing training to therapists about sex. But unfortunately, the problem is most people go to see a therapist, they bring up a sexual issue, and the therapist says, "Oh, that's probably not healthy." Well, the therapist is saying that based upon their sexual experience, not any data or research or training. The person gets scared. Oh, maybe I am a sex addict, or maybe me watching porn isn't good for my relationship. There is a porn kills love is the slogan of this, famous anti-porn group right now, and it's based on this study from 1989 where they showed Playboy centerfolds to college student males, and showed in this research in 1989 that looking at pornography actually decreased the amount of love and attraction these guys had for their wives or girlfriends later. However, 6 months ago, some researchers tried to replicate that research, and they found they couldn't, that it doesn't actually work. And they argue that original research was bad, that it was poorly constructed, bad statistics.
Isn't a lot of the research hard to do because it's impossible to get a control group of people who have not watched porn?
Yeah, if porn was damaging relationships, if porn was turning people into pedophiles, if porn was turning, watching porn is a slippery slope coated in KY, that where you start looking at Playboy and you end up fucking sheep.
I'm going to put a little ding, by the way, I think, in post of every little double innuendo you throw in there.
Bing!
Sorry, keep going.
But everybody at this point has seen porn, whatever porn is. My book is illustrated with these petroglyphs. We talked about that at the beginning, that are thousands of years old, because our species has always been interested in visual depictions of sex. You have a fantasy and you want to put it down on paper, in words or in picture or on video. Porn is just our way of sharing our sexual fantasies with other people. We are afraid of it because we're afraid of sexual fantasy, because we don't talk about sex fantasy. And I think those are the things that we can start talking about, and destigmatize some of this stuff. The danger is that, because so many therapists don't have any training on this, they think those fantasies are scary. And that's what I want to change. I think it's unethical. I think that my industry, the psychology and therapy industry, has been deeply unethical in not adequately training ourselves to address sexuality, especially in today's world where now people have access to all this sexual information. Last year in Quebec, a guy named Christian Joyel published research that showed that 50% of the population was interested in one sexual fetish or another. 30% of them had engaged in one sexual fetish or another, and that interest in sexual masochism was actually correlated with life satisfaction and sexual satisfaction. Now, those are all things that we used to think were unhealthy. We used to think that being interested in those things was uncommon and unhealthy. And it turns out they're not unhealthy and they're not uncommon. They're only uncommon because people didn't talk about them because they knew they would get shamed. I recently started a video series on YouTube called, hashtag No More Sex Shame. And, we're interviewing people about their experiences of being sexually shamed and how they overcame it. Because that's the narrative I want to start promoting, is that this sex shame is what causes the pain and the problem, not the sex. And there are ways to overcome it, such as finding, other accepting people who, won't shame you or stigmatize you because of your interest in sex, because they're interested in sex too.
And that was really, I think I circled it on page 1, and it's like the word I have circled many times in my notebook is the word shame. I think that's really just a theme throughout the whole book, whether it's theme about your sexuality or your sexual orientation or the type of porn you like, or just even liking sex at all. Mm-hmm. That's it. Just the shame was the constant theme throughout the entire book, which is just super noticeable. It's and it's sad.
And that is the thing that is hurting people. I mean, again, like research about folks that are trans. Being trans doesn't actually cause, depression or anxiety or mental health issues. But being trans in a family or a community that rejects you for it does.
Yeah.
So it is those social conflicts that we need to start talking about, because that's what's hurting people.
Well said. Perfectly put, man. Time for the fan whore appreciation moment. What's up? This is the part of the show where I like to give a shout out to some of the members of my fan whore community on Patreon. What is Patreon? Kind of like a monthly fan club subscription meets Kickstarter. You decide how much money you want to pledge each month, and how much you pledge determines which rewards you get, which includes bonus episodes of the Man Whore podcast, access to our super secret Facebook group, The Champagne Room, and much, much more. But for now, I want to give a shout out to Danielle DP. Oh, you dirty girl. You have been a longtime supporter and very fun to get to know. Frankie D. Can I call you Frankie? I'm sorry, Franklin? Whatever you'd like me to call you, sir. I appreciate that you have stuck around as long as you have. Thanks for still being here, buddy. And a shout out to a newer fan whore, Vitali. I don't even need to do a last letter initial because only Vitali I know. It may have been a short-lived patronage. May have been a quick one and done, but hey, I had fun with it. Kinsey, representing my great white north. What's up, girl? Happy Canada Day. And Grant. Grant's an old poker buddy of mine, so I was surprised to see his pledge there, but hey, I'll take it. He's taken way more money off of me in the past on the tables. And you too can join the club for as little as $1 per month. Yes, just a little dollar per month means a whole lot to me. Head on over to patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. And now back to me and Dr. David Lay. I want to talk a little bit more about you. Something I didn't know until we sat down. Somehow we walked the entire sidewalk. We went up an elevator. We walked down a hallway. We talked about my issues of being problematic on Twitter. And we sat down and I realized that you have a shorter arm than most people.
Yeah, I'm missing my left hand.
Yeah, somehow I did not miss that. Somehow I missed that. And I was curious, how's that? Is that life? Did you lose that at one point? Were you born this way? Or
you that thing where you walk up to the elevator and the doors are closing and you stick out your hand. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, no. No, I was born this way. It's a very apparent disability, although you're apparently blind and missed it, but that's okay. And it's
look,
not very...
your eyes are up here, and that's where I was looking. I was just trying to be respectful.
Man whore. Now I see how you play it. It's not very disabling. I have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been a wrestler my whole life, and I'm very physically capable. But my arm is something that has taught me how to, look for different ways to do things, because, I can't tie my shoes like other people. I have to find a different way. And in the same way, I look at things like sex addiction, or I look at, things like modern sort of treatment strategies. And I think, now, wait a minute, is that the only way to do this? And just because you think it's the right way, what if there are other ways that could work? And that's affected me a lot. It's also taught me to stand up for the people that are getting bullied. As a kid, I would get bullied and moved around a lot, and people would come after me, and I'd have to fight them. That's where I learned to wrestle and grapple and stuff.
You didn't do my move where you just curl up into a bar and get kicked until they get bored?
No, yeah, no. There's parts of me that just can't do that.
That was a signature Billy Procida move. 4 years of high school, yeah.
Ball up, yeah. No. If I saw you bullying my friends, I went the fuck after you. And that's what I see now is that, society is bullying and shaming lots and lots of people, especially around sex. And unfortunately, therapy does that too, which, was again, the reason when I started writing about sex addiction, it was because they came after me so aggressively. They threatened to sue me. They attacked me. They were.
Who's the they?
The sex addiction therapists.
Okay.
That just by criticizing the validity of their concept, they came after me like it was a war, because they tried to bully me into silence. If they had ignored me, I would have gone away. But instead, they tried to bully me and shut me up, which is exactly the wrong thing to do with a guy like me.
Yeah, stubborn much?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit.
Did it ever impede your sex and dating life, or did you feel self-conscious with women early on, maybe? Insightful question. Because of my arm, sexuality is really a thing about acceptance for me. It's about body acceptance. And, somebody choosing to be sexual with me is really a sign to me that they feel like my body is okay. And that feels beautiful and wonderful to me. It's something I really, treasure. And so sexuality has always been very powerful to me, which is why then when, people like sex addiction therapists and other folks are saying, well, you're not supposed to use sex to feel better about yourself. I'm like, no, wait a minute. I do. And I'm not sure there's anything wrong with it just because you think that. Same. I mean, like I gained a lot of weight like over the last few months. I went through a breakup, gained some breakup weight, down 6 pounds this week. No big deal. But like for me, it's like hooking up with someone new is the thing that like reminds me, oh wait, no, I am desirable. Like people do find me attractive in a way that like I not never, but like not at least right now, I'm not going to get on my own, because if I look in the mirror, I'll be like, ugh, if I was into men, I wouldn't fuck me right now. So it's like, why would anyone else want to? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
That's part of the way we're made. That's part of what sex is for. That's part of why it feels the way it does. And it's part of the really beautiful and wonderful thing about sex within relationships. And again, that's part of where I get really pissed off, because it's, the idea that that's not okay is people saying that there is a certain kind of sex that is okay, and that sex for love and sex for, procreation, for having babies is the only okay kind of sex. That's coming from a model that inherently distrusts sex, that feels like sex, if you want sex too much, you'll turn into a rapist. If you want sex too much, you'll become a bad person. But, throughout history, people like Albert Einstein, John F. Kennedy, on and on and on, all of
Wait, why'd you just lump Einstein and Kennedy together?
Because both of them had lots of affairs. Both of them were highly,
Einstein, JFK, he's a beautiful man, but Einstein with that hair pulled that. What?
Oh, Einstein was a big hoe.
I had no idea.
Yeah,
wait, tell me.
Yeah, I mean, in his memoirs and stuff, they have letters, where he was talking to his kids about, I was cheating on your wife, on your mom again.
Your mom / cousin once removed.
It was, and he. The thing is that, drive and initiative, intent to change the world oftentimes comes along with, a high sex drive. Martin Luther King. I mean, the FBI was blackmailing him with tapes that they had of him screwing other women. They were gonna expose him to his wife and everybody else. That we keep separating out sexuality and treating it as though it is something different, disconnected from all the other parts of who we are. But it is part of us. And many of the very good things in us come along with issues of sexuality. I mean, professional sports, professional athletes, high testosterone that makes you a good athlete comes along with high libido and high desire for kind of sensation-seeking sex. It's no wonder professional athletes keep getting caught in all these sexual peccadillos, because that's part of how they got to be a professional athlete.
Yeah, think about the Olympics. It's like it's just one big international orgy
with condoms everywhere. and I mean, again, that's what I want. I want to facilitate conversations that, like yours, like this podcast, is that start us talking about the things we're not talking about, because that's where the problems come from.
One thing we don't talk about is, when you think the body positive movement, it's always weight, right? But it's not often associated with people like in a wheelchair who have, body, born without an arm or without a hand, or someone who's got a really long neck. Who knows? It's like we always, when you think body positive, you think, oh, we're just talking about fat chicks, right? It's like we don't think about men, or we don't think about women who are like very skinny that they feel unattractive, or we don't think about all sorts of things. It's interesting.
Disabled sexuality is a whole other interesting kind of area. I mean,
something I definitely want to talk about more on the show.
There's a group in, I want to say Thailand or something, and they call themselves Helping Hand, and they're volunteers who go and masturbate people who are quadriplegics who cannot masturbate.
Love it.
And I just think there's something kind of beautiful and giving there.
I'll set them up with my friend Chris Crespo. I have a friend. He's also a comedian. His name's Chris Crespo, and he's got he's missing both arms. He's got like basically both the nubs, and then he's got little fingers coming out of both. And he would love to do something, a helping hand.
Yeah. But again, those are the things we're not talking about. Now, one of the other issues is autism, increasing recognition of, autism and autistic symptoms in lots of people, which come along with things like, obsession and, repetitive kinds of behaviors, difficulty with social interactions. Lots of people with autism are ending up getting called porn addicts because they get obsessive about collecting and watching porn. They're not good at social interaction.
They're just really obsessed with that one couch that they see in every video. Really, there's like
they're looking for that one couch. Those are the things again that I think we can start opening up. But I know lots of parents of disabled kids or developmentally disabled folks or autistic kids who they're like, well, I want my kid to have a healthy sexuality, but I don't know how,
and don't even know how to talk about it, let alone enact something for them. It's like, do I buy my son who's paralyzed from the neck? That do I buy them are you good on time? Okay. Do I buy them an escort? Like, what do I do? Like, it's and that's even after you have the uncomfortable conversation of your child's sexuality, which you usually just try to put blinders on.
Yeah, I tried to get Dr. Phil. I've been on Phil's show like 5 or 6 times. I tried to get him interested in doing a show about parents who buy sex workers or experience with sex worker. We're not buying a sex worker.
Sure.
I'm a dick. Sorry. Buying an experience with a sex worker for their disabled children. And in United Kingdom, I mean, you want to bash universal healthcare. Universal healthcare in the United Kingdom will pay for a developmentally disabled male to go to Amsterdam to have sex with an escort.
I'm moving.
I mean, that's...
Everyone was like, I'm moving to Canada if Trump's elected. No, you moved to the UK, apparently.
I mean, that's some good fucking health insurance right there. Holy shit, man. And, but even, here in the United States, I have a number of sex worker friends. That's one of their specialties, that they work with folks that are, disabled. The movie, the Sessions.
Love that movie.
And I think, again, those are these fringe kind of conversations that we're not talking about. And we, the disabled folks are oftentimes shamed for even having sexuality or is saying they have sexual needs. Those are the conversations I want to open up. Let's talk about it.
You got Blue Cross? No, I was going to get Blue Cross, but I ended up with Oscar. Comes with free hand jobs every month.
Yeah. Call your insurance broker. Hey, man, I want a policy that covers hand jobs.
Yeah, there's one guy who's just mad about Obamacare getting taken out because he's like, no, don't take away my hand jobs. In the book, you actually also... you hinted at, your use with porn and with depression. Like, has that ever... So you're married, happily married, assuming happily, right? Has porn ever gotten in the way of, like, your marriage?
I talked about that in the book, actually. That as I was writing this book, I remember a time when my wife complained that she thought I was watching too much porn. And as I looked back at that, I realized it was this incredibly stressful part of my life. It was really high intensity. I was depressed. I actually developed Bell's palsy, where half your face stops working, and it's related to anxiety and stress. And
You're like not nearly old enough for that. I feel
Holy
my
shit.
dad got that when I was
Yeah.
a kid, but Jesus, he was
Yeah.
he's older.
Yeah. And I realize now, looking back, that at the time, the reason I was watching porn was because I didn't have the emotional resources to try to have, satisfying sex for my wife and I. That watching porn was a time when I could relax, I could take the pressure off, I could just focus on myself and my own pleasure, and not have to work. And good sex actually is work. Good sex is responsibility and mutuality and communication and negotiation. Focus on your partner's pleasure. And sometimes we need a vacation from that. And I think that's what porn is for lots and lots of people, especially guys. For years, there was research that showed that there are men who are using high levels of porn and show high levels of anxiety and depression. And so for a long time, the researchers said, oh, look, porn is causing the anxiety and depression. Well, then later, better researchers looked at it more closely, and they followed those guys over time, and they found that, guess what? The depression and stress comes first, and then the guys watch porn. And it's guys using porn to cope with these negative emotions, so that if
And it doesn't have to be porn. It can be drugs. It could be alcohol.
Right.
I mean, my old shrink was telling me that I was always filling. I went to her with like a gambling addiction, but then she was bringing up it's not necessarily that the gambling's the problem. Although my bank account would say otherwise. But she was like, it's like you're trying to fill something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was that. Sometimes I will like have a lot of sex and always be on Craigslist looking for something crazy. Sometimes I'm binge eating a lot of food. All of them seem to be like coping mechanisms. It doesn't mean that the thing itself is a problem. It's like she's like, we could fix that problem, but you'll probably just use something else to cope with the underlying issue.
Yeah, if I walk into my doctor and I keep sneezing, my doctor doesn't say, oh, you've got a sneezing addiction. Instead, my doctor tries to figure out, do I have a virus? Do I have a bacterial infection? Do I have allergies?
Do I have a nervous tick?
That's right. And, I went into my doctor a couple years ago, and I thought I was dying of pneumonia. And I said, Doc, you got to put me on antibiotics. Doc looked at me and said, nah, you got allergies. Now, but there are lots of people today that say, oh, I've got porn addiction, and you can't take that away from me. I believe it's addictive.
It's my identity. Ugh, identities.
It is my identity. And, well, that's fine for you to have that belief, but as a doctor and as a licensed mental health clinician, my job is to provide good, effective, scientifically based treatment. And if I just take your word for it, guess what? I'm practicing bad medicine.
One of my favorite things in the book was where you're like, guy goes in, he's like, I got a porn addiction, and then he gets to your office, like, yeah, we should probably also bring up like the heroin I do. I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, this guy literally was shooting up heroin every weekend, but he thought his use of porn was the big problem. Are you fucking kidding me?
oh man, what do you think is the biggest hindrance to men in terms of our relationship with sexuality these days?
I mean,
I'm going to say typically like straight men, but like I think we could probably apply to all.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is that we don't have good models for what healthy male sexuality looks like. If you look at it, most famous men, if their sexuality becomes public, they are in trouble for it. Bill Clinton, etc. We don't have any good kind of models about what responsible male sexuality looks like. Now, the original title of this book was actually going to be A Gentleman's Guide to Porn Use, because I'm old-fashioned. I think that being a gentleman is kind of important, and it's not a misogynistic idea. It's about a self-awareness and a personal
It's
responsibility.
like wear a tux when you're jerking off. Goddamn it!
Right. Yeah. think James Bond. You have that martini.
Who, by the way, never when you think about it, for as many women as he fucks in those movies, never grabs a condom.
Yeah. And
think-
all he doesn't have to, because all the women die afterwards. I guess that's one version.
Whatever
of
I
safe
give
sex,
them, or
right?
if they get pregnant, it's okay. She'll be taken care of by the evil character. Oh no!
I didn't talk about it in this book, but I actually talked about it in my second book about sex addiction. I mean, remember Wilt Chamberlain? He was a African American basketball player. Allegedly slept with 10 or 15,000 different women.
Who at least one of them has been on the show.
Oh, awesome!
Dossie Easton.
Oh, perfect.
Who I didn't even know.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She just
That's
brings
great.
up and just goes like, I was just in this nightclub and I'm talking to this guy, and then we get up and the service was just like, have a good evening, Mr. Chamberlain. And I was like, shut the fuck up.
That's cool.
And I'm like sitting in front of this tiny, frail little woman. I'll be like, you handled the Wilt? Whoa.
Now, but Wilt decided early on, he knew he shouldn't get married. He wasn't a guy that was made for marriage. He knew, I'm not a guy that is made for monogamy. And he had rules and morality about how he practiced his sexual lifestyle, and he had integrity in that. He was never called a sex addict. He never had. He gave to charities, and people didn't have a problem with it. People weren't like, "Oh, he's a fucking scumbag. He's not monogamous. He's having sex with all these women." And that, I think, is a good model that we can start to recognize of how you need to think about yourself, your desires, to have some integrity, again, to negotiate from a responsible, ethical place how to meet your desires and needs within a relationship from a place of respect for your partner's needs, or etc. That's a good goal, but we're not teaching people that. That's what I want to. Unfortunately, guys get married because they're hot for the girl and they think, oh, well, I'm going to be hot for her for the rest of my life. And then 5 or 10 years later, what's the old saying? Show me the most beautiful woman in the world, and I'll show you a husband that's bored and interested in somebody else.
Oh, that made me sad.
Well, because unfortunately, guys, many guys, kind of crave novelty, and beauty is not all that it is. It's about, it's about negotiation. It's about communication. It's about the sexual excitement. It's about the spark. And there are ways to put that spark back in, but we're not talking to people about, hey, the way you feel right now may not necessarily be the way you feel in 5 years. And so you need to be thinking about how to negotiate or accept and manage that now and then.
Well, we also have this view on like guys that, if they don't have any sex, they're sad, but there's also a way to be like a man whore, title of this podcast. It's like that's typically seen as almost like a bad thing. One of my insecurities going into dating, part of the reason I started the show and why people had called me a man whore from time to time, but I wasn't this dude trying to get notches on my bedpost. I wasn't like braggadocious. I just happened to, I don't know why, but somehow I was able to have sex with like all these women, and they would say like, oh, you're a man whore. And I would get self-conscious that would prevent me from a loving relationship if she knew my sexual history, which I don't know how many guys do experience that. I was worried they'd be like, it was kind of a typically female thing, right? It's like, oh my God, is she going to find out that I've slept with too many people and think I'm like a slut and reject me and think I'm not worthy of love? And it's this weird like in between, like a guy, you have to have enough sex, but don't have too much sex, or you're like a dirty dick boy or something.
I like that because I think that insecurity, I actually don't think that is rare, Billy. I think that more guys than not have those kinds of insecurities, but they keep them secret because showing that insecurity or admitting it makes you weak. And I think we need to open the door for guys to have those conversations. Again, that's why I wrote this book, so that the guys who were nervous about their porn use, they like watching porn, but they're a little bit worried about it. A couple of years ago, I was here in New York, and I did Katie Couric's talk show, and it was one of the most painful experiences in my fucking life. It was kind of a sandbag situation. She brought me on, and at one point, I kept talking to her about, well, this is what the research shows, and she hits herself in the head and says, if you talk about research one more time, let's talk about common sense. And I'm thinking, common sense?
And then all those dumb housewives in the fucking audience like, clap, yeah, Katie,
yeah. Common sense said the world was flat, but I realized that that's the problem, is that we're not being very good about talking about the difference between research and and those gut instincts and those gut intuitions. We need to cross the divide. But as I left that show, I went to the bar and I got hammered. But I was talking to the bartenders about this experience, and they're all like, "Oh yeah, dude, I watch porn," and they started buying me drinks, and. It was then that I realized, wow, there are lots of guys out there that are experiencing this divide, and they can't talk about it because that's the reaction they get from folks like Katie. Mm-hmm. Now, being a dick, I dedicated the book to Katie.
Wait, I must have missed that page.
Yeah, it's early on. I snuck that in. I thought about sending her a copy. A few years ago, David Duchovny threatened to sue me for my book on sex addiction, and I offered to send him a copy. He turned me down too, Yeah.
David, where can people find you?
Yeah, Twitter is the best place, at Dr. David Ley, DRDAVIDLEY.
Savvy enough to know to spell it. Most people don't.
Yeah, that's right.
What are you talking about? Why can't they spell Liechtenstein Bergstein? So find him on Twitter. Go get his book, Ethical Porn for Dicks, A Man's Guide to Responsible Viewing Pleasure. He's also got other books you can check out. But was it Sex Addiction?
Insatiable Wives and the Myth of Sex Addiction.
Go check him out. I know I'm going to be checking out Insatiable Wives because that sounds hot. But for now, why don't you just say goodbye to everybody?
Thanks for having me.
Fun conversation, right? Dude has a lot of awesome points. Really cool stuff about shame. Do go check out the book. And the book's plural. He's got good books. I've read one of them, but I'm sure the others are good too. I want to check out the hot wifing one in particular. A couple little fact-checking things. He mentioned the jerk-off girls somewhere in Asia that give hand jobs to the disabled. That group, at least the one I could find, was called the Hand Angels, and they are based out of Taiwan. Also, the stuff about the United Kingdom allowing their insurance to be applied to people who are physically disabled to go to Amsterdam to get prostitutes. I could not find anything that suggested that this is a normal practice or something that is like written into the law. However, there seemed to be at least one occurrence of this, one municipality in the UK that did approve a request for a young man back in 2010. This might not be the only case, but it was the only one I could find where the government paid for this guy to go to Amsterdam to see a sex worker. And I'll have links to the articles regarding those two things in the show notes. Also have links to all of Dr. David Ley's places in the show notes too. Go check him out on the internets. He's great to follow on Twitter. And as I said in the introduction, links to the various Laci Green videos are going to be down in the show notes as well. Going to be a full show description. Really, a lot of stuff for y'all to go check out. But I do hope you are checking me out already on Twitter and Instagram at @TheBillyPresida. Give me a little shout out, say hello, use the hashtag ManWhorePodcast. Let me know what you think about the show. Do go like the Man Whore Podcast on Facebook. Do not go like Billy Presida on Facebook. You're looking for the Man Whore Podcast on Facebook. There we go. Join the conversation with your fellow fan whores on the Man Whore Podcast subreddit. There are individual comment threads for every episode. You can also see various links to articles that I'm quoted in, places I've been mentioned, podcasts I've appeared on, and I also make various announcements over there. For you Redditors, it's r/Man Whore Podcast. Come hang out with all of us in the Champagne Room, our super secret Facebook group for patrons. Having access to that Facebook group also gives you access to all sorts of bonus episodes of the Man Whore Podcast and other bonus content over on Patreon. Join for as little as $1 per month at patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. What a deal. Just $1 a month. You can change my life around. I'm serious. It really does. I've said this many times before, and I will continue to say it many times again. If every single listener right now pledged $1 per month, I'd be making quite the comfortable living, which only means more Man Whore Podcast stuff for you. Okay, so go do your part. Go to patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. That's patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. Go have a conversation with someone you disagree with. Set up a somewhat neutral, respectful, calm-toned space where you two can try to understand one another without absolutely hating each other. Be a better human. I believe in you. I really do. And this outro is running a little long, so maybe I should just go ahead and answer whatever this text message is. Oh, it's my girlfriend. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that text message, and why don't you go ahead and stay slutty?